Merci, Laure. Thank you, Laure. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'll take half an hour to take you through some interesting things with Yandex. I've never lived in China. I tell it immediately. I don't speak any Chinese. I was once in Shanghai, and I was completely amazed by what I saw. And the second thing that amazed me is when I realized, having worked a lot in Russia, what is happening to the Russian tech and the Russian e-commerce space with the investments that Chinese companies are doing there. So I'm not speaking Chinese, but with us, we have actually Madzin. Madzin, could you stand up? Who is from China, one member of our Chinese team working in Moscow for us and available for your questions afterwards. Thank you, Madzin. So the title is, why are the Chinese attracted by Russia, and why should any tech e-commerce employee be attracted by Russia? We'll try to answer that shortly. Yandex is the largest tech company in Russia and one of the largest one in Europe. We consider our mission to help people in their everyday life through technology. So we of course help people finding things on the internet. We help people finding the smartest and fastest way out of a traffic jam. We help people find the latest information on a blog. And we help Chinese companies or European or French companies talking to the Russian audience. The company, and this is less known, but is listed on the Nasdaq and actually is the largest European capitalization or tech capitalization on the Nasdaq. With a coordinated intervention of OPEC and the Russian central bank, the value you see below me reduced. This is now, before it was above 10 billions, but still we are a large company and very well capitalized. We are spread into many offices, 16 offices around the world, 6,000 employees, I would say 5,000 programmers. I'm not one of them, but 5,000 people who are actually engineers, programmers, and you know Russians are pretty much very good at that. We have offices and a corporate style which is very particular. So if you have any chance to visit one of our offices, and soon, actually next summer, the coming summer, we will open an office in Shanghai. I hope you will visit it when you pass to Shanghai next time. I think it's always worth the experience. Now, taking a little bit a helicopter view and thinking about what we heard for the whole day, what is going on in the internet and what is going on in all these internet-related businesses that we see. The world population is 7 billion people. Somebody said this morning 80% are in Asia, and we counted India part of Asia, I remember that. So 2 billion are actually online. And these 2 billion people will soon be 3 or 4 billion, and most of them will be in Asia. Now, they find their way through the internet via search engines, and there are 6 main search engines which they use. 3 of them have a global index. Google, of course, Bing, and Yandex. Yandex is not known for having a global index. It's known for being the Russian search engine, but it's one of only 3 companies that have actually indexed the whole internet. Now, I'm not saying you will find comparable good results if you use Yandex in France, but you will find results because we have the global index. Now, more interestingly, there are only 3 countries where the big dominant Google, who is doing an amazing technology job, is not leading. And these 3 countries, amongst these 3 countries, there are 2 we talked a lot about today already. Of course, there is China, and I was a little bit surprised that I heard a lot about Chinese companies, but not a lot about Baidu today. So I'm happy to actually mention Baidu, who with a 60% share of search in China is a key player, and probably soon going to be the largest search engine in the world just because of the sheer figures of the audience. Now, the other country we talked a lot about, and I learned personally a lot about today, is Korea. Korea they have their own search engine, Naver. Native search engine, 60% of the market, 73% of market share. This is huge, and this is not easy, and I know what I'm speaking about. And then you have Yandex, who has, almost like Baidu, and this is a coincidence, close to 60% market share in the Russian search. So they are local champions that can win in a highly competitive technology market. In Europe, we always have to mention this because people here, they kind of forgot that there can be any other option than Google when you search. The Americans, they have more choice because, you know, a quarter of the searches are performed outside of Google. In these three countries, it's a completely different situation. And if you want to do any business and use internet in these countries, you have to understand and learn to work with these three companies. They are local, they are different, and you need to just take time and understand how they work. So if you look about Russia, as I mentioned, Google has 32%, we have almost 60%. The rest is split between small local players, Mail.ru being the largest mail server in the country, and we also actually serve their search engine. Now, what is very important, and this graph, this tendency, you will find it in other countries as well. I don't know about the timing, but in Russia, something happened which was very important in summer 2012, is when the audience, the daily audience, or to say the daily reach of the largest search engine of Yandex passed the daily reach of the main TV station in the country. And we talk about Russia, where TV stations, you know, there is at least one TV in every possible house, and there are three main channels which people watch. So this means that the internet actually passed in reach, in daily reach, the largest TV audience, which has a huge repercussion, as we'll see, on the advertising market. Now, when we talk about Russia and Yandex, we often forget to talk about the other markets, which are smaller but still very interesting and certainly fast growing, which are around Russia. Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Belarus. In these countries, we have their respective market shares, which you see behind me now, which means working with us, you can approach not only the Russian audience, but the Russian-speaking audience. Now, talking about this, what is the Russian internet audience? So, first of all, not all the Russian speakers live in Russia. Actually, it's about half of them. Russian is the fourth most spoken language globally. Of course, the first one is Chinese, and they're going to consolidate their #1 position for sure. Then you have Spanish, English, and Russian. There is about 250 million people talking Russian, and many of them live in communities outside of Russia, not only in the CIS countries. So working with the Russian search engine allows you to address also the expat communities living abroad. The same applies for the Chinese and for Baidu. Now, talking specifically about Russia, the internet audience of Russia passed Germany as the largest European internet audience 2 years ago. Before, we were always #3, then #2. Now Russia has the largest internet audience. And this internet audience is now above 80 million people who are online in Russia. Now, of course, all these figures are kind of 10 times less than China. And you have to get used to this because it will be the case in most of the slides. But still, it's important to know that in Europe, there is a big market out there. And if you look east, and you are ready with your company to go and export to China, of course, you also have to look at Russia. These 80 million will grow. And here is an interesting fact that when you see that China only 48% of the people are online, Russia only 58% of the market is online. That means that every e-business which is happening now in China and in Russia has an enormous growth potential in any e-business possible, just because of the audience and the population of these countries, which will still go online at a much faster pace than in the Western Europe, where it's almost close to saturation level. Here is an interesting slide which talks about Europe only. And this slide is constructed, these are actually the countries, and the surface means the population, the total population, and it's split between those who are online and those who are not yet online. And you see the red is Russian. And you also may see that Spain is a fairly large country with a 76% penetrated. And then the third one, or the second one actually, it's the second one, I guess. Oh, it's the third after Germany. You see a country which I think is almost never mentioned during conferences, but which is very interesting. This is Turkey. Turkey has already now an extremely large population, young population, growing very fast, but only penetrated with internet at 51%. That means that e-business and e-commerce and all the businesses in Turkey have also very good days ahead of them. And this is also the reason why Yandex, as a first non-Russian speaking country, launched all its services in Turkey 2 years ago. We believe that this will be a major internet market, a major internet business in the future, and we believe Turkey has been kind of off the radar screen of many companies so far, but soon they will wake up and realize that there is really a potential to grab there. So I think this is a good summary of the tendency in different European countries. Now, a few words about the Russian advertising market. In money-wise, we talk money here. So the volume of ad segments presented by media channel and expressed in rubles, you see that TV, beside the problem that happened with the financial crisis in 2008, is still very much leading and growing. What is amazing is the path at which the internet economy and the internet advertising has overtaken all the other media channels and is now, after TV, to become the number one. This will probably take a few more years, but whatever happens to the economy or to the currency currently, this trend is clear, and we talk about an economy that is also going very fast towards digital. To illustrate it with shares, clear shares for the different media channels, you realize that actually the internet part, which now represents 33%, took over most of what was the press, which is the red bar, which was 41% in the past. This is obviously a tendency that happens in most of the countries, but the speed at which it happened in Russia is very dramatic. And I'm sure in China you have similar. I would love to see the Chinese data on that, by the way. When you talk about how do people spend their money online in Russia, most of the funds and most of the investment go into what we call contextual advertising, which is search marketing, 72% in 2013 versus 28%, which is banner displays, etc. There is currently, this trend may change because of the number of technologies which are invested now to make display marketing as efficient as search marketing. This is happening also worldwide. Google is doing a lot in this, we are doing, Baidu is doing a lot, and I think this yellow parts which you see should grow in the next few years. Now, something which is interesting, because we heard a lot of people talking about e-commerce. In e-commerce is currently very much underpenetrated in Russia, with only 30 million people out of 82 million users actually making transactions online. So the upside potential for e-commerce players in Russia is even bigger than those who are already targeting just the audience. And what is the dynamic in this e-commerce market? It is growing, obviously, but it is growing, it is now at a level of $20 to $25 billion. I remember the other slide we saw earlier this morning, I think it was, which showed that the Chinese e-commerce market is 400 billion. So this is over 10 times more, and I think the growth rates were similar. So this is very impressive. Nevertheless, every player, local player or international player that targets Russia in terms of e-commerce, there is a very clear trend, and the market is there to be taken. The top categories of online orders in Russia, we heard Tiziana before about fashion. It's actually the second category in Russia, after, of course, electronics and household appliances. We'll come back to that when we look at some statistics which I've prepared for you from China. Now, what is also very particular in Russia is that cross-border e-commerce takes more than half of the volume of total e-commerce in Russia. That means the Russians have actually understood that they have access to a worldwide shop by just going online. And in most cases, they hope that the international site will have localized their site and made a Russian website. But in other cases, they even make transactions in foreign languages. And when you see that out of $25 billion e-commerce, 14 is actually cross-border, that is enormous. And obviously, China is behind this huge trend that we see here. I would say that Chinese e-commerce players represent at least half of this blue bar of 14 millions. And the development has been dramatic in the last years. So if many European companies are thinking about China as a destination market, a market where they can actually sell their goods via their e-commerce websites, what we also see in Russia is the other thing, is Chinese websites exporting into Russia very, very large amounts, and very successfully. They have localized their websites in Russians, they have Russian-speaking customer service based mainly in China, and they have actually price levels which are unmatched in Russia. And I think this trend is something which we see very strongly since 2 years in Russia, and I would not be surprised if this also happens in Europe, which is a good news for the consumer because they can get access to a whole set of products for very interesting prices and more quality. Now, talking about the Chinese. Globally, and this is online and offline, the trade between the two countries is of course developing for different reasons, but it's almost at the level of $90 billion. These are figures for 2013. Now, online, when we see what is happening purely on Yandex, the revenues Yandex is getting from Chinese customers, we are not allowed to give you the real figures, but the growth rates is 200%. So Chinese companies are definitely attracted by the Russian market, attracted by its growth potential, and they're investing massively to take market share away either from international competitors or other local players. And I think this is the dynamic that you don't feel yet in Europe, but we feel it very much in Russia. And again, for us or for the Russian consumers, it's very good news. The quality of the websites, the Chinese websites that have been translated into Russia is increasing. The quality of the translation itself, the way they localize it, it's improving as we speak. The most popular industries of Chinese business who are advertising on Yandex and therefore targeting Russia, of course, e-commerce. I'll come back to that. And then there is tourism, online games, and B2B equipment. And when you look at the most popular categories, first position, you find clothing and footwear. First position. Second position, raw material, and then electronics, mobile phone, etc. And clothing takes almost 19% of this enormous pile, which I showed you before. So this is a very significant part. Now, just adding a few words about Yandex advertising solutions. Why I'm doing this? Because most of the people who want to go into China or who want to go into Russia from Europe, they are Google enabled, as we say. They know AdWords, they know how to work with AdWords, or they work with agencies that are familiar with these tools, but they don't know and they have to adapt to the tools from, in our case, Yandex or from Baidu. Yandex should be your partner for advertising in Russia because we collect 2 ruble, or 1 ruble out of 2 ruble which are spent on online advertising in Russia. We collect half of the revenues. And we do this via, obviously, the main tool is the equivalent of AdWords, which in our case is called Yandex Direct. All the big internet investors are our clients. And to use Yandex Direct, you need to take time to be guided through it and to be trained on this new tool. It's not just a copy of Google AdWords. It's something you need to take time to understand how it works. And we are here as international sales or international customer service with our partners to help you doing this. We have in most European countries partner agencies that have been trained, that have even a Russian speakers amongst their staff that can help you to really use our tools, and our tool is called Yandex Direct. We have, of course, testimonials for big companies, as you see here. There could be many more. If you know, we can mention this by industry afterwards separately if you're interested. Now, search marketing generates 68% of our revenues, and display is growing slightly, as you see, 21%. And that brings us to a total of 55%, as I mentioned before. Clearly, search marketing is where you can really make your business successful in Russia. It's all oriented on performance, and it's basically the tool with which companies like we heard before, Luis Xavier Roma, is making inroads into the Russian consumer. I mentioned that display advertising is changing, that the technology is making it more and more performance-oriented as well. I also mentioned that Yandex is not only a search engine, but basically a portal. And you see different display products which we can tailor to your target or to your advertising goals on the different products we sell or the different services we have on our portal. Then there is one thing which I need to spend some time on because it's extremely important and it's unique. We don't have the equivalent in Europe. It's called Yandex Market. Yandex Market has been created in the beginning of 2001, I guess. So it has been very early on an aggregator of e-commerce in Russia. If you are an e-commerce player in the country or exporting into Russia, you have to be on Yandex Market because that's actually where every internet users will start to search for any good they want to buy. Because we started so early on, it became really, in French we would say le passage obligé for those who want to look for something online. And this is an aggregator. That means every e-shop lists, provides us with their inventory and prices via an XML feed, and we basically have shop ratings, consumer feedbacks, consumer ratings, a whole ecosystem to allow people to make their buying decisions. As soon as they want to buy, we send the lead to the shop to make the order. This tool is actually very important if you are an e-commerce player and want to enter Russia and you have localized your site. You need to have a Russian website to be in there. And international players who have actually listed their products on Yandex Market have had a huge advantage versus those who have not. Now, because of the importance of Chinese export, as we discussed before, we're even considering making a special section of Yandex Market for Chinese suppliers, because there are so many volumes and so many offerings from very big or even smaller Chinese players that we want to have this, this aggregation tool also available for them. Yeah, and we have, it's a resource with 19 million visitors a month. It's really something you cannot ignore. Now, another thing which we have, and just to show you that it's a little bit different from what you're used to from Google, we also have something called the media contextual banner, which is actually displaying a visual banner on the search result page, and which is actually displayed via the keyword that you search for. So this is a product. I'm mentioning it because most of the people do not believe this is possible or don't believe it can exist because it doesn't exist on other search engines, but these are things which we do. So just as an illustration to show you that it's worth spending time on understanding the tool to make your best campaign in Russia. And finally, obviously, there is a lot of activities and investments going on in technology for mobile. We have newly communicated some innovative mobile advertising products for our users or for our advertisers, for our customers, who have been asking for this for a long time. We have seen the figures about mobile products in China, which are enormous, and I think this is clearly where the trend goes. There's nothing new here. We are part of that game, obviously. I think that is it for what I wanted to tell you, just a short introduction. Grow your business going to Russia, grow your business going to China. I think the opportunity is huge and the markets are just developing at a very fast pace. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Spasiba.
Nie za что.
So clearly localization is very important with the Russian market search engine like it is with China. And there's so much innovation coming out of China. And so I'm wondering if you've looked to sites like Baidu for sort of new ideas for services and products that you've been developing.
Clearly, we consider Asia as a place where innovation happens even at a faster pace than the West currently. Obviously, there are still some very, very important developments happening, especially in Silicon Valley in the West. But I think what's happening in China and the speed at which it's happening, which was also mentioned already today, is kind of an eye-opener. Our CEO recently, for the third time, went to China, and every time he comes back, he's with a big smile and amazed because he says this is really, there is some energy there that we don't see anywhere else in the world, which is surprising because with such a big home market, you would think that people are just busy, addressing their home market needs. But no, they are going for the world. They are going for being the best in the world, and they develop extremely fast.
Yeah, you mentioned the cross-border traffic that's happening, but can you give examples of the Chinese websites that you are seeing going to China? And we're talking about like search sites or e-commerce, Alibaba, Baidu?
No, so we see mainly services and e-commerce. So basically, of course, AliExpress, which is a subsidiary of Alibaba, as you know, we have many customers. I don't want even to try to pronounce them because I would be offending. But when they come to us, they have studied the market. They have seen the potential of the Russian market, and that is the reason why we have actually, even now in Moscow, before we open our Shanghai office, a small team of Chinese-speaking people, just to address the questions and the needs of these big customers that are looking. Yeah.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Are there questions from the audience? Any questions? Yes, okay, we have one question.
Hello, this is Johan from CD Networks. You mentioned, obviously, we all know about the booming market that is China, and you mentioned Turkey. So I would be interested to know your opinion on some other markets, simply like Middle East market or African market or Southern American market, to know what is your opinion today on their internet penetration and future, really.
I think there are. We are all very happy and lucky with you together because we work in an environment where there is so many growth opportunities almost everywhere in the world that there is almost no exceptions. There is no saturated market. Now, I think to win in this, you need to really understand the local culture, and this is a core value for Yandex. We believe that we will never be an international company. We want to be a translocal company. That means we want to have local teams understanding and adapting our products and our services for the local market. Therefore, I cannot really comment on the markets we haven't really worked on. I'm sure there are huge opportunities in, as you mentioned, Africa, Middle East, or even, of course, Brazil. But we are really trying to focus, and the countries we have selected is the countries where we want actually, to have a very serious share and to defend it with technologies. We are not after the world, but we want to be taken very seriously in some countries which we have targeted, basically. But opportunities are there, yes.
Okay, well, we can end there, I think. And we're trying to get a little bit back on schedule, so thank you very much.
Thank you.